There is a massive lag. Just
God.
FYI as we go forward.
You'd think we'd be better about this in the year 2020. Where is my
Like
instant
technology?
communications? Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. I was gonna say I don't know how to be better about that. It's just the way the world is.
Where is that weird high-speed antenna thing they have in Ender's Game? I feel like AOL Instant Messenger was more reliable than this.
It's because we got distracted by social media, and those overlords have made sure to just make us docile. What is it? Is it called the circus and bread and circuses?
Oh yeah, Panama.
That's the direction technology has gone.
Oh man,
yeah.
Good old Pan Am. Thanks a lot, President Snow, Carolianus, classy bastard, poisoning son of a bitch. Sorry, I could vamp on that for forever.
I didn't know you were so into the Hunger Games,
dude. I loved the Hunger Games. I was about to say I digested, which would be just too on the nose for talking about Hunger Games. But I devoured. Oh, that's even more on the nose. Whatever. I read them very quickly, and I'm a really slow reader, so that is a testament to how into the series I was. But by the time I reached the end of, I guess it's the third book. Have you read them?
Yeah, and I actually had a similar thing where I read all 3 within a couple of days. It was wild.
Yeah, I was just listening to Machine Head because they had just put out a new album and reading the books, and then spoiler alert for our lovely listeners, they killed fucking Prim, and the whole point of the story went out the window. They also turned Katniss into kind of a ruthless killing machine, and I just kind of at some point she shoots somebody in their apartment. It just felt very, I don't know. It was a weird 180 thematically, and I still liked the overall arc of things and how the story wrapped up, but there's just that spot in the climax or the climactic area of the third book where everything just seems to kind of be I don't know, I guess we blow a bunch of shit up, and it left the weird taste in my mouth, and maybe that's the poison that I was being slipped the whole time.
I mean, most people agree with you from what I've heard. I personally always thought that it was a really interesting portrayal of what trauma and, corrupt, abusive governments can do to an individual.
Yeah, I think it got back on its footing at the end of the series, and I haven't read the prequel just because I felt like nobody really asked for it.
Right.
Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it just felt kind of, it was a weird way to go for that, what things were leading up to. But that's just me. That's me vamping about the Hunger Games. Hello, and welcome to Everything's Bigger,
a podcast about masculinity for dudes of all genders who ask why.
And when we really get down into it, when we think about it, we realize, the two of us at least, realize that masculinity is a whole lot like your favorite Halloween candy. There's so many different varieties of it. Do you like chocolate? Do you like peanut butter? Do you like chocolate with peanut butter in it? Do you like fruity stuff? Do you like crunchy stuff? What kind of candy do you like? And the thing is that there's something out there for everyone. And it's really, really hard to get the concept of masculinity wrong unless, just like Halloween candy, there are some that we do not welcome in this house. Candy corn.
Yes.
Candy corn.
Yes.
Is toxic masculinity. There is no candy corn in this house.
I'm so here for it. I didn't know when it was going to end, but I'm here for it. I'm very anti-candy corn. But anyways, I'm Jackson Bird.
And I'm Bo Mendez.
And today, if you did not get it already from that and from the title, we are discussing Halloween.
It's spooky season, people. We made it.
It sure is. It is our favorite of the seasons, and we are going to get into all of that in just a minute. But first, we are going to just talk a little bit about how we've been, how the world's been. Also, this is our second time recording in our remote locations, not at the YouTube studio where we used to record, and we just feel like we're floundering a little bit as we get used to this. Didn't quite plan as much as we usually do, but we're making it work.
We're going in with no notes. This is amazing. We're in uncharted waters.
We are very much in uncharted waters. That is the theme of 2020.
Yeah. Ugh. Oof.
Everyone's doing new things for the first time, doing things in new ways.
What's weird to me is that this has started to feel so normal. And like that's exactly
Yes.
what
Oh my gosh, I have had the exact same realization this week.
that's exactly what I didn't want to happen. But everything about this is just starting to feel so typical, and like and it's starting to intrude in all these other different areas of life. Like so we've been watching stuff on Hulu, and with Hulu you have the little ads, and I noticed that a bunch of companies now have ads that very prominently feature people wearing masks and like observing social distancing. And like it's not enough to have your voiceover be like, curbside pickup is available, we'll see you soon, anymore. It's like you actually have your actors in a filmed spot acting out curbside pickup and showing like all this sort of stuff. And it's great because it's normalizing it for certain parts of the country that never got their shit together.
That's what I was going to say.
And didn't embrace that sort of behavior in the first place. But for those of us who have been here and observing this sort of stuff for 7 months, it is really just kind of like hammering it home that like this is how life is going to be, at least for a little while. And it makes me think about the fact that the 1918 pandemic, which I kept on drawing obvious comparisons to the fact that, you know, we live in New York and a lot of it took place in New York, and it was a nice even 100 years between, and I work for a historical society. That was 2 years. Like I was thinking about when we started setting up for this, I was thinking about our last, you know, full on remote recording, because we did the GLA thing, but that we were at least on video for, and it was like, you know, it had a different feel and a different atmosphere. It was live, all that good stuff. But the one we did before that was the first one that we did in isolation, and we were talking about our birthdays. And I think there's stuff in there where I'm like, yeah, hopefully by the time my birthday rolls around, things will be a little bit more different and things will be opened up a little bit more. Maybe all this will be behind this. And now I can re-listen to that for next year's birthday.
I pushed as gently as I could, but I was getting in a lot of trouble with a lot of people at the time for trying to explain to people that like this isn't 2 weeks, this isn't a month, this isn't 3 months, this is the next couple of years of our lives. And people did not want to hear that, which I understand. But
You're
I think
absolutely correct. I did not want to hear that from you.
No, I know. I angered quite a few friends. But like I guess that's why the fact that some things are feeling normal, and there's those portrayals in the media and stuff is helping me now, because I've been freaked out for a long time, especially in March. I had a really, really hard time just because, and I was hoping I was wrong, but I was like, this is like, there is no going back to normal. This is just new normal. This is what life is going to be for a few years in some ways. And so now that it does feel normal is a little bit better. And like now that other people are coming around to that, and especially like it's being portrayed in certain media and ads and stuff like that, is helping me. But I understand that I have often been on the opposite like side of the orbit of a lot of people throughout this experience.
Yeah. To be fair, you never got me angry. I respected everything that you were saying, and I like kind of like filed it away with, I hope he's wrong, but just in case he's right, that sort of stuff, you know.
Just in case he's right, we're gonna buy that extra like pack of toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, like I went on the first grocery run on the way home from work, like the weekend that or the week that we started shutting things down, and I got like an extra roll of toilet paper and a big thing of soap, and I was like, we're good. Then it became very clear, very obvious, very soon that we'd have to figure out other stuff. So like when we've been planning since then, I've kind of had like a mixture of your voice and other voices that have been maybe a little bit more outwardly pessimistic, but in like a realistic sort of way. And, you know, I got to say, sometimes it's good to have that angel on your shoulder being like, no. Take this a little bit more seriously than that, buddy. It's going to be okay, but only if you actually get your shit together.
I always have to laugh when I think back at the start of lockdown, because as we just said, like I was sort of stocking up for about, in small ways, like a month prior, you know, just adding a few extra things to the shopping cart here and there. But on March 15th or 16th, like I guess the 16th, the day before the bars shut down in New York City. And so it seemed like it was really going to be a big deal. I had kind of my last hangout with a friend, and I was walking home, and knowing that I wasn't going to be able to go out for St. Patrick's Day, I stopped in at a corner store and was like, I'm going to get myself a 6-pack of Guinness. And while I was in there, and it was the whole store had been transformed. It was the first time I went in somewhere with like all the employees wearing gloves and masks, and like just you could feel that difference that things really had in March and April. But I go in to get my beer, and I noticed that they have masks and hand sanitizer for sale. And I think I had maybe bought some, but I knew that they were really hard to find. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to pick up some of these while I'm here. And so I go to check out, and all I had bought was a 6-pack of Guinness, a mask, and 1 bottle of hand sanitizer. And the man checking me out just kind of gives me this look as if like I'm this poor soul who only heard about what was happening today, and I think this is enough to get through. And he just goes, good luck. And then it went off, and I was like, I bet there were people doing exactly that, but fortunately that was not my case. It just looked like it.
What a cinematic moment that is.
It
the
was.
Day before St. Patrick's Day, buying your Guinness and someone saying good luck. I don't know if he had an Irish accent, but my head definitely just gave him one.
Shockingly for my neighborhood, he did not, but yeah.
Yeah, like I'm definitely picturing him wearing one of those, like, what are they called, the pork pie hats or whatever? You know, the traditional kind of like the flat front ones.
Oh yeah,
like,
the flat cap, like newsboy.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, he got that kindly Irish bartender from Cork energy, just like, good luck, lad.
No, he was more like a late 30s weightlifting Middle Eastern dude.
All right, fine, but
so total opposite.
Truth is stranger than fiction sometimes.
It's very true.
But damn. Halloween this year is gonna be, it's gonna be weird. And you know, the great thing about Halloween is that it kind of gives you free license to just go ahead and be weird. All Halloweens are weird in a certain respect. But I think this year, you know, the last time that we did one of these and we were addressing the pandemic in the room, as I called it. Or at least I was talking about like, hey, hopefully, I was saying like, hopefully by my birthday it'll be cleared up. But in the back of my head, I was like, hey, hopefully maybe by Halloween, maybe we'll actually,
because you always host. For listeners, Bo and his wife Sloan always host a big Halloween party. That is my favorite thing to do at Halloween.
Well, that's the sweetest thing anybody's ever said about us. Let's before we put this show up, let's just cut that clip, and I can just like play it on repeat whenever we're feeling down. But yeah, like that's our one opportunity to remind people that we don't hate them, is the fact that we actually will invite them to our home and do Halloween stuff. You know, and it's like we try to go into it as much as you can without like a front yard to put headstones and all that sort of like cool. No,
can't wait till I have a front yard to put headstones in.
12-foot Home Depot skeleton. The only
all I'm saying is, you know, if I had a yard and a car, I would have bought that already.
Exactly. The only real winner of 2020 is the Home Depot 12-foot tall skeleton. But yeah, so I was hoping that we'd be able to do that, and you know, it warms my heart to hear you say that you enjoy that so much, because we really enjoy doing it, and it's something that has kind of like, I don't know, become for the two of us, for my wife and I, it's become really important for just like our relationships with people, but it's also become really important for like how we view ourselves and where a relationship is to this time of year, and so. You know, I was hoping that things would have returned to a certain degree. I don't want to say returned to normal, because, you know, I think that we've heard this a lot, and I think that you and I have talked about this before. Normal kind of sucked. So I don't really necessarily want to go backward at all. But I did think that I hoped that we would have gone forward to a point where we could resume, where we could, you know, have an element of a traditional Halloween. And we're kind of not going to get that. But I don't think that should keep us from trying to enjoy this holiday as much as we can, because, like, you know, the things that we do in the modern era, like, it's not necessarily like they're things that people have been doing since the beginning of time. They're just like, you know, they're traditions and practices that we have kind of elevated to this point. And there are other ways to make this time of year and this holiday feel special for us.
Yeah, I've I've been pretty relieved seeing how into Halloween people actually are this year. Because of course there are a lot of ways that we have usually celebrate that are not happening. Parades and probably trick or treating is not going to happen in some communities, at least with some families.
Hmm.
And I did see a few people online saying things to the extent of like, "This year is scary enough. We don't need to do Halloween." What do you feel? How does that sentiment make you feel? I am against it, but I have not unpacked why. I think it's because I fiercely love Halloween, so I just got knee jerk angry at it.
Oh, dude, I don't agree with that at all. Like, I do think this year has been very scary. But the thing about Halloween version of scary and real world version of scary is that they're two very different things. You know, I think that there's something life affirming. There's something joyful. There's something maybe a little bit mischievous in the kind of scary that we experience for Halloween, where it's kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of actively holding a mirror up to ourselves and
Mhm.
recognizing the things that make up, you know, the macabre, the scary, the terrifying, but also like Halloween isn't always scary. I think it's also a time where, you know, people might feel maybe a bit more empowered, or they might feel like in touch with something that's a little bit difficult to explain. And so like, I don't think that there's ever a year that's too scary. I'm doing big quote fingers right now, dear listeners. I don't think there's ever a time that's too scary for that. And there are other ways, you know, to adapt to the scenarios. The one that I can think of right now that's, you know, obviously stuff like virtual Halloween parties are going to be a thing. You know, ours became virtual, so you know we're definitely on the bandwagon for that. But I saw, to the subject of trick or treating, I saw people coming up with candy slides, and it's just like a
Oh,
tube. You
and
know,
like zip line kind of things.
well, I've seen like the kind of like plastic conduit that you'd use for like wiring. You get the brightest orange shade of that you can find, and this really only works if you have a house or at least a stoop, and you stick it on
Yeah.
like the railing for your stairs up to your doorway or something like that. And that way you maintain a safe degree of distance for you with a recently hand sanitized or begloved hand to grab your fun size Three Musketeers and pop a couple into one end of the tube. And ideally, since it would be like on the staircase, you get a little bit of a slope and then it shoots out the other side. And like, what doesn't, that communicates the spirit of Halloween so much, where like you're actively looking the scary thing in the face and you're kind of laughing at it a little bit. Not in the
Yes.
sense where it's like you don't take it seriously, but where like you're gonna just like power through. And so I actually really admire that. So long as people on both ends of the candy tube are, you know, playing by the public health rules, and not taking any unnecessary risks. Like maybe don't take a lollipop directly out of your mouth and then put that in the candy tube to
Yeah, those
send to
days are
like a,
over for
you
now,
know,
unfortunately.
yeah, exactly.
We've had no spitting in
Jeez.
each other's mouths rules at some of the outdoor small like hangout sessions that we've had in my neighborhood. So it's a real bummer of a rule that we
Fascism.
had to add in 2020. No spitting in each other's mouths.
Jeez. You know, where will it stop? I'm being kidding. I'm kidding, folks.
Yeah, but
I'm
but
being kidding. Is that a thing that people say?
not really. But if you want to say it, you can try to make it a thing. But no,
How do words?
I think you had a great point about, looking the scary thing in the eyes and either just confronting it or perhaps embracing it in some way, or, making it funny, making it bearable in a way that you feel like you can take charge over it. I think that's a big part of Halloween in different types of traditions over the millennia. Um, you know, yeah, there's just so many different incarnations of Halloween that have existed, and I think that's one of the cool things about it is there are a lot of different things that Halloween can mean to different people in very meaningful ways.
Yeah, I think and you know, you can start off with like the history of it, you know, when because Halloween, of course, is like All Hallows Eve, so it has a direct tie with the observances of All Saints and All Souls Day, because that's, you know, those are the All Hallows days. And so you have like the direct tie to that. So there's a lot of tradition there. But then you look even further back and you look at like the pagan traditions that were kind of subsumed into All Hallows Eve, and see that this has been something that people have been doing for a very long time. And I think we've talked about this before, you know, off camera, off mic, so to speak, about how when the temperatures start to drop, when people are claiming their, you know, fall harvest of the things that they've planted throughout the spring and the summer, they're kind of like preparing for the long, uncertain, dark, and difficult winter. So I think that that's kind of something that's at the root of a lot of Halloween observations, or not observations, observances rather, is the knowledge of this kind of looming uncertainty. So Halloween is an opportunity to kind of, you know, like you just said, to face it, to embrace it, and to kind of like prepare yourself to an extent. And now we've taken that and added all sorts of different decorative elements, and the spoopiness of it all, and it's become a way for us to kind of like have fun and find joy in this period where we're kind of, you know, again, stepping into the unknown, stepping into the uncharted waters.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It was sort of that thing of, you know, the end of the harvest, the days are getting shorter, night is coming earlier, the trees around you are literally dying with their fallen leaves. It's, yeah, it's exactly what you said, of just starting to sort of prepare for the oncoming winter. And winter is still very hard in lots of places for lots of people, but you know, back in the day of like Samhain and stuff, like it was much harder. People died a lot more because of some of the more elemental challenges of winter. And so taking that time to really, you know, acknowledge nature and acknowledge what had come, and, you know, pray to whatever spiritual guidance you had, and maybe to some of your ancestors who had been lost, in hopes of having a good healthy winter. Like that's a lot of what it was about. It was taking that time to confront those oncoming fears and prepare for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and I think we'll we're sort of jumping the gun as we have want to do. We'll get a little bit more into that later, I think, but I wanted to I had an excerpt prepared from a Halloween textbook. Um, so I read this book a few years ago, and there was one thing that stood out to me that I wanted to share with Bo and his wife Sloan, because as Bo was saying, Halloween is a very important thing in their household. They always host this big Halloween party. It's a big thing in the friendship between the three of us that I think we share. So, you know, at least when I see a lot of Halloween things, I like to share them with both of you. And so there was this one line from this book where the author referred to Halloween as a cultural collision of glitter and grave dust. And I just thought it was the best thing I had ever heard, and I think I might have proposed it as a couple name for the two of you. One of you's glitter, the other's grave dust. You're both kind of glitter and grave dust. I don't know.
We still fight over who's who.
Yeah, it's just but it's definitely the definition of your relationship somehow. uh,
No, I'm glad you brought that up, and like, I think that that really ties into, like, you know, the spirit of spirit of the observation of Halloween, because it's like, if it's a collision of glitter and grave dust, you know, the grave dust is the reality, the harsher elements of it, the need for preparedness, the unknown,
mhm.
the risk of, you know, living another year on this planet, and the glitter is the things that we do to add a certain degree of, and I don't want to sound, you know, like I'm discounting that reality, but we're adding some fun to it, you know.
Mhm.
We're here for a good time, not a long time.
um yeah, I love, well, and so to elaborate on that, I did want to read, I went back and found the first time that that phrase is used in this book. And by the way, I'll put a link to this book in the show notes, but it's called Halloween: The History of America's Darkest Holiday by David J. Skall. This is actually the second edition. I originally read the first edition, which had a totally different title, so it's kind of confusing. The first edition was called Death Makes a Holiday, I think, which kind of leans into what we were just saying. And also, the first edition had a much better cover. I feel like they made a mistake on the second edition of the cover. It just looks very hokey now. But whatever. Now you have all the information if you want to look up the book on your own. But anyways, here's the paragraph in which he sort of talks about well, uses that term, but also just kind of talks about some of the different paradoxes of Halloween and why it does resonate with so many of us. The cultural collisions, controversies, and occasional catastrophes attending Halloween may simply be hardwired into a holiday forged from the tug of war between glitter and grave dust, the sacred and the profane, order and lawlessness, the mainstream and the marginalized. Conflict and consternation are likely unavoidable in a celebration based on pranks, reversals, and the ritual suspension of propriety. Despite the best and sometimes worst efforts of people on all sides of the socio-political spectrum, Halloween is a holiday that refuses to play by anyone's rules. Unpredictable and unrepentant, Halloween also remains stubbornly unofficial and underground, and this may be the key to understanding the tumult that regularly erupts in its name. Despite the considerable cultural space Halloween now occupies, despite the billions of dollars it annually spends, and despite the passionate commitment millions devote to the holiday, no legislative body has ever seriously considered making it legal. Which I found interesting. I did not fact check, but I think that's interesting that it's actually not technically a legal holiday.
That's wild. I actually never really thought about that. It's it's funny that we're doing this today. Just kind of something that's on my mind is the date of recording is October 12th, which is Indigenous Peoples Day in the year of somebody's Lord 2020. And today we also had a rather what's the word? Creative proclamation issued by the sitting president. Talking about,
I may have missed this.
oh, thank your lucky stars. Talking about, basically when a federal holiday is declared, each president makes a show of proclaiming that it's this holiday. So I'm saying Indigenous Peoples Day, but of course the federal holiday is Columbus Day. And the president made this big show of issuing his proclamation very publicly and just filling it with all sorts of the word that I want to use is revisionist history, but I actually believe that history does need some revising. So let's just call it, I don't know, making shit up, or it's not even making shit up. It's stuff that happened, but it's whitewashed and sanitized and just not good history. And it's interesting to think about.
I feel like because people are listening to this in the future, I am the only person currently listening to you ever who will not know what you're talking about. I'm in such suspense right now because I didn't follow the news today, and so I don't know where you're going.
Well, again, you made the right choice. You can look it up if you want. It's just another thing to get mad at the president about. But it's interesting to think about the relationship between official holidays and unofficial holidays and what that means when it comes to, the people's observance of them. Like, there's something that I find really endearing in the fact that there isn't like an official Halloween commission. There's probably a couple of organizations that will tout themselves as that, or like, a town that says that they're the capital of Halloween or something like that. But the fact that there isn't.
Quick side note, my hometown did self-declare itself the Christmas capital of Texas.
Yeah, see, stuff like that.
There has now been a statewide proclamation made, but yes, so indeed, towns do things like that.
And it's kind of cool to think that, like, that hasn't happened with Halloween. It doesn't belong to any governing body. It belongs to us. It belongs to all of us. And that's all of us who choose to observe. I know that there are different cultural interpretations and different ways of being where people just don't observe Halloween. That's peachy keen. I'm not trying to rub it in anybody's face. But for the people that do observe it, I think it's really cool that there isn't, there aren't Halloween regulators walking around with rulers ready to slap you on the wrist for, stepping outside of the Halloween lines.
Yeah. Are you going to tell me what this proclamation was from the president?
Well, it's just.
I'm still waiting.
It's just his Columbus Day proclamation where he goes on this big.
Wait, he knows that like FDR proclaimed it in 34.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that like, so I'm not sure how official this has to be, but I have noticed that every year that there's a federal observance, there's like an additional proclamation that's like, oh, in case you forgot, today's official day of blank. And so this is his version for this year, where it actually ends by saying what the actual history of it is. And so it's like, therefore, on this day, October 12th, 2020, I, Dickhole B. Jackhad, proclaim this to be whatever. So yeah, but the stuff that comes before that is, it's Stephen Miller ranting from behind the curtain about how awesome Christopher Columbus is and how bad any attempts to look at history through a critical lens is, and goes on to tout the executive order against anybody who would damage a monument to Christopher Columbus, the 1776 Commission, or whatever the hell their knockoff, bootleg 1619 project is, and a couple of other of their, white supremacist song and dance. Basically, it's just patting himself on the back for that dumb shit, while also being like, kind of giving the finger at the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day, which, what would you expect?
Yeah, gosh, that's horrible.
Man, sorry for that tangent.
The good news is, again, going back to sort of what is an official holiday, the good news is tons of people personally celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, but also 14 states and growing officially celebrate it. And I just learned today that it's actually, for many years, been part of a United Nations proclamation, going beyond just the U.S., although celebrated in sort of recognition, in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of America. Wow. Of the United States specifically. But yeah, so I mean, just another way that the U.S. is breaking other accords with the United Nations. Yeah, it's just another.
Yeah, who said that we needed to be part of the United Nations? Anyway.
Hey, we're talking about confronting scary things. This is just another scary part of our current reality.
This is very true. So to go back to the initial question, if any year is the year for Halloween, it's probably this one. Because it keeps on throwing stuff at us.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I mean, I was watching, and I cannot remember her name, but it's a comedian on YouTube. She does like sketch comedy on YouTube, and she's been doing a series of videos. The first one went viral of just sort of like talking to her past self about the pandemic. And so I think the first one was like, in April, and talking to her 2019 self and trying to explain what's going on. But then every few months she's done it again, and it's just like, it's wild to watch what we thought was so much in June and in July, and then now. And even it made me think about, like, boy, in 2016, even before the election, we thought stuff was going off the rails. I listened to a podcast today. What is the podcast called? It's like You Don't Know or You're Wrong About or something. But the topic was killer clowns. And so, of course, they go all the way back through the history, starting in the mid 20th century, of the different alleged killer clowns. And of course, usually the killer clowns are just a hoax, or a coincidence. John Wayne Gacy, what was his name?
Gacy, yeah.
Gacy, yeah. He him being a clown actually was not connected to his serial killer stuff at all. He didn't use it to lure in his victims. It was just like a thing he did on the side that actually kind of seems like was part of what he was trying to do to make him feel like he was a decent person and contributing to society. Weird history. Anyways, the point is, I was listening to a podcast about killer clowns today, and just thinking about how in 2016... Yeah, but in 2016, before the election results, when the election was just happening, the general election in the U.S. here, and the killer clowns thing was happening, and there were a few other things happening, and I remember having this sense of like, oh my gosh, everything is going off the rails. This is just like, how could it get more wild and terrible than this? And like, oh my gosh, I would give anything to be in the summer of 2016 now.
Oh, dude, yeah.
And so just sort of thinking about that, and then the videos I was watching that have that same sentiment, but from even just a few months ago, is just such a huge reminder that I need to get rid of that idea of like, oh, this is the worst it can get, or like there can't be more than this, because if this year has taught us anything, there can always be more. It can always be worse. And so we just have to be ready to confront that, and we have to find ways to be able to like cope and deal and be okay with things as best as we can as they go along, and sort of have more internal ways of confronting them ourselves and getting through it that aren't necessarily as dependent on external factors.
Wow. Sorry, that was heavy.
Oh, sorry, was that too heavy for our fun Halloween episode?
No, I think it was perfect. Like, but it was just like, yeah, like we do need to figure out our ways of coping, of dealing, and of finding joy during this time. And I think that, looking back at what the history and what the spirit of Halloween has been, aside from just like fun costumes and candy and that sort of stuff. And it's funny for me to talk so seriously about something that is by nature kind of tongue in cheek. I think of a lot about how when you get into the syncretic religions of the Caribbean, things like Santeria and voodoo, um, uh, a lot of an overarching characteristic of a lot of the spirits and characters that are involved in the belief system there is like this ribald sense of humor. So like you'll be hanging out with like the spirit that represents death and like the person who is the inspiration for the devil meeting you at the crossroads, who's a spirit drawn from this tradition. And like that's a really serious, that's a weighty presence to consider. But they also tell like dirty jokes and get drunk on rum. And so it's really interesting to look at how effectively the very serious life or death issues that are always present and that in some cases have been amplified by this year, to look at how those issues will be mirrored and kind of upended by our attempts to find joy in them. Like whether it's watching a scary movie, whether it's eating candy, whether it's, dressing up as your favorite character or just like, being bonkers and doing pranks or something like that. It's very, very interesting to see the dichotomy between the joy, the mischief, the chaos, and the real world consequence of things. I'm sorry. I'm just
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, no, and you made to go back to clowns briefly. You made me think about how the clown archetype in literature and in classic theater, and going back, I think to like the Grecian stories even is not the clown as we would think of it now with the kind of bozo type of makeup and hair. It was just like the trickster archetype. I mean, heck, going back to mythology, like Loki was the clown archetype.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily this purely, although we would all obviously disagree these days when we all find clowns creepy, but it wasn't meant to be this like purely like joyful, funny for children kind of thing. It was more like the trickster who's going to play tricks on you, and in some ways that are like really terrible in confronting with mortality, and also like the court jester who is the only one who's allowed to speak plainly to the king,
Right.
those kinds of things. In some of Shakespeare's plays, the clown figure is like this depressed dude that's hanging around and saying all the like most serious things and packed full of wisdom. Like that's what the clown archetype used to be. And it is kind of interesting that we have almost gone full circle as a society of like clowns are pretty much just scary to people now. There was some like, and this is pulling from the podcast I listened to earlier. I hadn't heard this before, but apparently there was some type of like study done at one point in 2008. They took a bunch of 4 to 6 year olds and were gonna like redesign a hospital like wing for them or something, and every single child said they did not want clowns. Like clowns are not a thing that children like anymore, so we've kind of gone back to clowns are just kind of scary and creepy again. And that's what they used to be, and it's interesting that we have that because in the second half of the 20th century and the first part of the 21st century we had so many of those like hoaxes about like killer murderous clowns, and then in reaction to that we got things like Stephen King's novel It, and then the movies It, and then like all kinds of other horror films with creepy, scary clowns in them. So exactly what you were saying of how we're mirroring those things that we get scared of in real life, and like all of the different ways that it plays out is just like so weird. But it kind of goes back to again what you were saying about just melding the humor into the fear as well. Like finding a way to, oh, it's like, I don't really want to bring up Harry Potter, but it's like the Bogarts in Harry Potter. How do you defeat it? You make it funny somehow. It shows you
Yeah.
your worst fear, and you have to find a way to make it funny.
Yeah, no, dude, that
And
was
I'm
actually
sure that
on
is
the
pulled from all kinds of like cultural references that were slightly appropriated that we're not aware of.
there's a chance. I think boggarts are somewhere like actually in like European mythology, and like they're kind of like
Yeah,
lumped in with
it
the
as
fae
a
and that
creature,
sort of thing.
not in the same, yeah, not in the same application or whatever as the way J.K. Rowling used them, but definitely like the creature exists beyond
Yeah.
the Harry Potter canon.
Yeah, but yeah,
canon.
that comparison was definitely like right on the tip of my tongue. So it's not nuts that you brought it up, but it's so that has me thinking. Like we've been talking a whole lot about Halloween is kind of like this mirror on society and this way to kind of like inject a certain degree of affirmation and fun and mischief into this otherwise kind of difficult time. And I kind of want to to use the mirror metaphor, I kind of want to pick that up and also use it as a way to look at ourselves, right? Like that's something that I've when I think of like what does Halloween mean to me, the first big bucket is definitely all this stuff that we've been talking about. Like even growing up in like Central Texas where it never gets particularly cold, like you knew that Halloween the air just feels different. Like it doesn't have that like blanket like soupy quality of summer. It just feels a little bit more like you're being kind of wrapped up in something, which is funny to say it doesn't feel like a blanket, but it feels more like like an enfolding sort of thing as opposed to a smothering sort of thing.
I do feel like there's a certain smell, there's that crispness in the
Yeah.
air, but also certain smell that. But it is funny that we say this when, as you brought up, we both grew up in Texas, and I remember like seeing maybe movies or even just like my cousins who lived up north and how they would, as children, their parents would be planning their Halloween costumes around the idea of maybe having to wear like sweatpants underneath it or a winter jacket on top. Meanwhile, in Texas, it's like, all right, is that long sleeve grocery store costume going to be too hot for the end of October when it might be 80 degrees?
Oh, dude, I had so many like sweltering Halloween costumes.
Oh, so hot. Yeah.
Especially like in the late 90s and early 2000s, because every cool character wore like trench coats over sweaters. So that was always fun. Actually, yeah. Before I get into what I was gonna say, I'm curious. Do you have any like favorite costumes that you've had or anything like that?
Oh man. I was a Ghostbuster one year, which I really liked. I feel like Ghostbuster and Peter Pan, which I think were back to back, and those were high school actually, because my high school let us wear Halloween costumes to school.
Oh, that's awesome.
But because we had a lot of more conservative Christians who did not celebrate Halloween, we weren't allowed to call it Halloween, so they called it Goblin Day. And I have no idea where that came from, but I think it's the coolest sounding thing ever. Like, I still think it's such a cool phrase, like Goblin Day.
Goblin Day. Yeah, that actually, honestly, that sounds more sinister than Halloween to me. Like if I were
Well, and that. Oh, I was just gonna say Goblin Day does kind of fit more with like the late 1800s, early 1900s conception of Halloween, which is more like the mischief night of like that's when kids would just go out and like cause havoc all over town.
Yeah, or like the whole Devil's Night thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Also, great choices. I was a ghost, so I was an astronaut. I don't know, 5 or 6 times in a row. Because that's all I wanted.
Skeleton
to be in
was
life.
my repeating one as a small child.
Yeah.
It was always a skeleton.
There's always a classic that makes repeat appearances. But then one year I rented Ghostbusters 2, not realizing that there was a Ghostbusters 1, by the way. I thought that was the movie, Ghostbusters 2. And so I didn't.
Oh, that's. You know what? I rewatched Ghostbusters 2 last year. There's a lot of sexy stuff in that one. So wow.
I don't know. I guess maybe my parents are a little loosey goosey with some of the stuff that were rules in our house. But I think that maybe they also just didn't remember the movie because it came out in like 1992 or whenever it did. So it's not like they would have seen it recently. But I rented it from the same video store inside of Walmart every weekend for like a year. It would be me, the same VHS of Ghostbusters 2, a small pizza from Papa John's, and this is the same thing that would then repeat when I got really into James Bond. But because of that year, my mom took my astronaut costume and outfitted it with a name tag and a logo and all this other stuff to turn it into a Ghostbusters costume.
Wow, cool move, Mom. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was the jam. So that was a good one. And then she made the best Halloween costumes. Mom, if you're listening, you're the shit. So she took me and my friend to see Blade. Have you seen Blade?
I haven't.
Oh my God, it's incredible. It's on the list. Dear listeners, part of my virtual Halloween thing was putting together a movie list that I sent to people. So if anyone's interested in that, maybe I can
Alamo Doomhouse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Alamo Doomhouse, we called it. But Blade's on the list.
Also, I just have to brag about you and Sloan for a minute. They also developed a Scoville rating instead of a Scoville rating, so you know how scary the movie is before you watch it based on the Scoville rating that it has.
The Scoville rating rates spiciness. The Skullville rating rates spookiness. So, you know, it made sense. That's a Sloan idea. I can't take any credit for that. But yeah, so Blade is about Wesley Snipes as a vampire hunter. And I wanted so badly to be Blade. So my mom made me like he has like armor and a trench coat and all these like silver stakes for killing vampires and all that sort of stuff. She made me all of this shit with like aluminum foil tape and a catcher's chest pad and all that sort of stuff. And what's interesting is that it never it's funny to think about it now is that neither, I don't know necessarily how to say this properly, so I'm probably going to sound like a total weirdo, but neither of us once looked at me and then looked at Wesley Snipes and was like, what's different about this? And I think that is a testament to both my mom and me at age 8 to know that blackface is never okay. I don't care what anybody says. Just don't do it. If you want to be a character that's a different race or ethnicity than you, go for it. But don't do blank face.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I have seen a few people being like, okay, you know, we can give a little bit of leeway for children, but also maybe that's a conversation parents should be having with them. It's complicated.
Yeah, and I don't remember a conversation, but I feel like trying to imagine myself being, you know, I'm transporting my consciousness back into 8-year-old, 9-year-old me, being like, oh man, this costume is so great, but shouldn't I try to look darker? And my mom just being like, nope. That's the conversation.
I also like don't feel like you would have thought that. I don't know. I don't feel like I ever did as a kid. Like it's always been a really weird leap to me for someone who is like, oh yes, now I must change my skin color for this costume. It's very strange to me.
I don't know. I was a kind of a dumb kid, so I don't put anything past myself at that age. But anyway, yeah. So
well,
go ahead.
I wanted to bring up one completely unrelated thing from your anecdote there, which was just that it was only the other day that I remembered that we had video rentals inside of grocery stores. It's not just that there were video rental stores. There were like small versions of them in some grocery stores. Mm-hmm. And I completely forgot about that until the other day.
And dear listener, this is not Redbox that we're talking about. At least for me, like mine was inside of the Walmart.
This was many, many years before Redbox.
Yeah, exactly. Inside of the Walmart, next to the hair salon or between the hair salon and the place where you got your really bad pictures taken, there was
I forgot there was a hair salon.
Yeah.
And the pharmacy and then the photo place.
Yeah,
our video rentals were by the photo place.
That's weird. We didn't grow up in the same town, but I think we might have gone to the same Walmart.
No, this was a Tom Thumb.
Wait, what?
Which I don't know if you had those in Tom Thumb. Yeah, it's a very North Texas chain. I think it's owned by Albertsons, but it's just called Tom
amazing.
Thumb.
Next.
The mascot looks like a combination of like a comic cartoon version of the actual Tom Thumb, mixed with kind of like the Pillsbury Doughboy or the Swedish Chef all like put together. It was
next episode of Everything's Bigger. We're gonna go deep cut into weird grocery store chains, folks.
Heck yeah, Winn-Dixie all the way.
Piggly Wiggly? Is that one still?
That's apparently a real chain. Yeah.
Cool. Not a grocery store, but Wawa.
I always thought it was a joke. Oh, Wawa. Yeah, that's a new one. Did we have the same Wawa first time experience together on that camping trip? Or had you been before?
I had been before, but it was still incredibly special to me.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, thanks for the kind of like trip down memory lane there. Like I just wanted to
Always good for that.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to talk costumes because, like, we're talking about how Halloween as like a cultural phenomenon is this mirror on society and is this kind of, heavy on the inside. It's like a nougat candy. It's heavy on the inside, but it's crisp and fun on the outside. And that might be what Halloween means for like society. But I think on an individual level, holding that mirror up to us as individuals, Halloween, it every time that Halloween is on the horizon, we have to ask ourselves the most difficult question in human existence, which is, what do you want to be? And I think that's like a really, interesting thing about the holiday because, it's not just like, who do you want to dress up as because you think it looks cool, but it's like, what do you think reflects you? What do you think represents you?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there are people who don't give it nearly as much thought as I'm giving it right now. Like there are probably like, and I've been that. I remember one year, I was working retail and we had weird hours and I didn't have time to put together a costume. So I went to the Target underneath the store where I worked and bought like whatever makeup was left. And it was like a, build your own devil kit. And so I put on a Dare t-shirt and the devil makeup with little horns and I was Daredevil. So that was,
clever.
Not particularly, reflective of who I am as a person, although I do love Daredevil and Satan. But
I did have. I was just gonna go on last minute Halloween costumes because I'm with you. Usually, there's a lot of preparation that goes in and a lot of thought. But there was one year, and I think it was the first year I ever went to one of your parties. I was sick. I don't know if I had a bad cold or what, but I was not feeling well. And so I decided to just put on a skeleton hoodie that I had. And this was the year that the, what is his name? David S. Pumpkins. That Tom Hanks SNL sketch had just debuted. And so I decided to go as none David S. Pumpkins with left skeleton. And that's what I told people I was, but really I was just wearing a skeleton hoodie.
That.
I was just so sick. And then you had that whole Stranger Things setup, and so I was able to just sit in the corner of your living room and eat waffles out of a toaster that you had put there as a setup. It was the best party ever.
I remember that. Oh man, that was great. That tree or like the stuff that Sloan did on the chalkboard wall, it didn't come off until we moved.
Oh man.
Like that shit was on the wall.
All right, but anyways, you were going
incredible.
on a really beautiful metaphor about discovering who you are vis-a-vis the costumes of Halloween. As a comparative literature major back in the day, I am here for this and I want to hear more from you.
All right. Well, I'm about to bring in the literature. But yeah, so
nice.
While there's plenty of people and plenty of instances where you're probably not going to overthink your Halloween costume, as anybody who listens to this show knows, Jack and I are both professional overthinkers. So of course I'm going to overthink my Halloween costume, and I'm going to relate it back to that question of who do you want to be? What do you want to be? And it got me thinking. There's a show. Adult cartoon show. Whenever I say adult cartoon, I feel like that implies dirty, sexy times. But
I know,
it's
right?
a cartoon show for adults. Anyway, recently canceled. Pour one out. Gone before its time. Let's get a movie or something. The Venture Brothers has an episode. It's a Halloween episode. And
can I stop you real quick, Bo? Because I'm gonna play. You always need a character in the book who's like new at the school and doesn't know what anything is, so that the main characters have an opportunity to explain it to the reader.
Mm-hmm.
I am that for our listeners now, because I genuinely, even though I watched the clip you sent me, I genuinely don't really know what the Venture Brothers is about. I've heard about it over the years, but I have no idea what the show is about. So could you just give us a quick summary of what this show is?
Oh God, it's such a weird show. Well, it basically started out as a parody of Johnny Quest. Like kind of part Johnny Quest, part Hardy Boys. So if you're familiar with either of those, And eventually, though, the funny thing about the Halloween episode is that it's episode 1 of season 5, or like it was a standalone special between season 4 and season 5. And that means that there's all this backstory that is, if that's the only thing that you watch of it, there's all these callbacks and jokes and characters who have gone through transformations, and you don't get any of that from this episode. You're just kind of like dropped in context free into this scenario. But basically the show follows this family, the Venture family, as they tussle with supervillains. And then at some point, lots of stuff starts to become kind of a pastiche of like Golden and Silver Age Marvel comic books. Like the family lives in this big compound, and they get a tenant who moves into one of the rooms and starts living there, who's basically a ripoff of Doctor Strange, Dr. Orpheus. He's Doctor Strange is the Sorcerer Supreme. Dr. Orpheus is the Master of Mysticism. They both speak in like kind of like, at least comic book Doctor Strange speaks in these kind of dramatic, you have no idea that what you have trifled with, that sort of stuff. Lots of hand gestures. By the time the Halloween special rolls around, the show is kind of, it's really its own thing. In order to fully explain the Venture Brothers, I cannot recommend enough that you just need to watch some of it.
All right.
It's a really fun show, and it's very referential to like lots of pop culture, and it's really fun, but it also has like these odd moments of heart. One of the recurring themes throughout the show is failure, which is that like, Dr. Venture, the one of the adult leads, is just a failure at being a parent to the Venture twins, Hank and Dean, who are these woefully out of touch teenagers who have no idea how to actually be teenagers. Their arch nemesis, the Monarch, is the worst supervillain of all time. But he just keeps on coming back. And so it's just this interesting thing where all these different characters, there's not really a good guy or a bad guy so much as just a lot of people working through their issues in the most hilarious, cartoonish, and like pulpy ways possible.
Good one sentence explainer.
Anyway, did you say good one sentence explainer?
Yep.
Go to hell. But not really.
I don't know. It's Halloween. Maybe we'll go to a hell house.
Yeah, right. Jeez. But anyway, in the Halloween special, how can I set this up? Basically,
you said the show has a lot of heart, so I feel like this might be a moment of it.
Yeah, exactly. So a bunch of the magical characters have kind of like messed around with things that they shouldn't mess around with, because they're trying to just make Halloween creepy and scary, and they actually resurrect a bunch of zombies, and then that becomes a problem for everybody. And once all the zombies are taken care of, Dr. Orpheus, who's kind of the leader of the magical characters, is like, you guys don't even understand what the real meaning of Halloween is, right? That's not what it is. And he has this little monologue that I'm gonna excerpt here. I'm not gonna do the voice, but it goes a little something like this. Halloween is the night we discover who we are. Are we people who make zombie armies? Are we those who condemn others? Are our choices and costumes provocative? Or do we dress up as our ideal selves? Or are we not yet ready to decide what to be? We use this one enchanted night to perform the greatest feat of magic there is. We become ourselves. Halloween is the true magic. It's the night we discover who we really are. And scene.
I love that.
And I think about that a lot, like ever since seeing that, which was a few years ago, but it kind of really encapsulated what the holiday really means for me. Because, looking through at least my own personal experiences of like who I want to dress up as, for the most part, there've been people that I admire, or characters rather that I admire. Astronauts, Ghostbusters, Blade, Vampire Killer. But also, Gomez Adams, the archetype, the coolest dude of all time. A Ghostbuster again. I'm going through like what my list of characters has been. Ichabod Crane from Sleepy Hollow. Like, these are characters that, yeah, they fit the stories that are evocative of Halloween, but every one of them has a certain degree of like, you know, this is a character that I can see a bit of myself reflected in, or at least would hope to see a bit of myself reflected in, because of something that they are capable of, or something that they represent. And again, I know I have to keep on like throwing out this disclaimer that I know that there's tons of people that probably, when there's trick or treating or a party to go to, they probably roll out of bed on October 31st at 5 o'clock at night or something like that, and just grab whatever's nearest and put something together. And I'm not trying to discount that or something like that, but I do think that Halloween presents us with a unique opportunity to sort of like, you know, if for one night you didn't have to, not even that you didn't have to be you, because at the end of the day, you choose this because you are you. But if you didn't have to necessarily conform with the circumstances that you're in, and you got to be an idealized version of yourself, who would that be? And that's just, I don't know. It's the most oddly hopeful, kind of poignant, magical thing that comes out of this holiday of like, you know, debauchery and creepiness.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I really like that, because I think, you know, even for the people who do put less stock into what they're going to be for Halloween, there's still an element of like, you're choosing what you want to dress as, even if you're choosing from limited options, or you have some other, you know, considerations in there, like not wanting to put much effort in, or wanting to, you know, look kind of sexy or anything, which is all totally fair game. There's still an element where you are choosing something that you like. It's something that you like and you feel expresses yourself on some level, even if it's not as deep as the many of us who do dress up as a favorite character, or someone that we, you know, wish we could be like, or a career that didn't work out for us that we want to dress as.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a really good, that's a really good way to put what I was trying to say, is that like, it's not like there's anything less in not necessarily putting quite as much effort into this, because you're right. At the end of the day, if you have three masks in front of you and you pick the one on your left, you still picked that mask means something to you. And that's what's going to be, you know, this persona that you adopt. And, you know, maybe it's just a way of just having fun, but at the same time, like what's more sacred than that?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I got to bring in here is, you know, the little monologue you did from Venture Brothers, talking about, you know, dressing up as who we are, or maybe who we're not ready to be yet. Very strong trans vibes there in that monologue. And you know, I think Halloween is very important for a lot of queer and trans people, and gender non-conforming people, just, you know, anyone sort of figuring out their identity, which can also go beyond all of those things, but specifically in the queer and trans realms, like historically, it is a very important time. And a big part of it is that opportunity for exploration and for expression, you know, a chance to dress up as how you really feel inside, when maybe you either aren't ready to express yourself that way in the day to day, or you aren't able to for some reason. You know, whether that's the circumstances of who you're living with, or what your job is, or as it was historically, the government sanctions. Pulling again from that Halloween history book that I have. And this is covered in a lot of other histories, but this book specifically talks about San Francisco, back in the, I guess, late 50s, early 60s ish time. And how at that time, as it had been for a while in most places in the United States, there were a lot of different laws on the books to prevent homosexuality in as many ways as you could. So obviously, it was just like the acts of homosexuality were illegal in many ways across many jurisdictions, but there were also things like, a lot of cities, it was literally illegal to serve alcohol to someone who was gay in some way. And there were also a lot of laws about how many articles of clothing you had to be wearing that conformed to your assigned gender. So anyone who was gender nonconforming, or anyone who was trans, had to, like, if they were trying to dress in the way that truly expressed who they were, they had to make sure to have on, like, I don't know, underwear or something that was still their birth sex adherence to, otherwise they could be arrested. There were just all of these ways, as happens with so many different marginalized communities and identities. There were all of these laws that were specifically made to make life hell and give credence to be able to arrest and persecute these people. But at least in San Francisco on Halloween, a lot of the like vice squads that were most notorious for busting people on all of these laws on Halloween, they would sort of give them a free night. And so not only was it already a day where you got to kind of like dress however you wanted and party, but like it was also a day where you weren't going to be harassed as much as usual. And that's sort of where we get some of the origins of Halloween being such an important day in the LGBTQ plus community, because it was literally the one night where people could be themselves without fear of arrest in some cities in the US that had these laws on the books. So it's a little kind of interesting footnote in there, in the idea of Halloween, even beyond this population, being a day to be yourselves.
It's the greatest feat of magic.
Yeah.
You know, it's the simplest goal, but in a lot of ways, and for a lot of people, it's the hardest thing to do. And I feel like, not to put it all on this one day, but I do think that there's something special about Halloween that just, I don't know, it might be, as you're talking about in these scenarios, an actual lifting of restrictions. It might be giving the individual a certain degree of courage or confidence, but with, any way you look at it, with this kind of lens, it's providing a freedom that, even if it's temporary, is, I don't know, it's just so, it's so pure. If all you want to do is dress in a way that makes you feel like you're you, whether that is wearing, different articles of clothing that express yourself differently, or dressing up as a superhero, it doesn't matter which one it is. And
Could be both.
You just get to experience this freedom. It could be both.
When I first said that, I was saying it just
that.
sort of as a glib, like, why not thing, and then realized that I literally did that myself. So,
see, it's great. It's magical.
No, it is, and and I think in these cases where we are talking about someone who's maybe using Halloween as a vehicle for exploring their identity, it's another way of that confronting the tough truths that we were talking about to begin with. Because as happy and great and awesome as coming to terms with who you are is, and coming out and all that kind of stuff, it's incredibly difficult and frightening. It's a very, very scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in confronting those truths, like, I think that is sort of just such a strong element of Halloween. And so I kind of wanted to shift us a little to going back to that conversation about some of the macabre elements of Halloween and its ties to our own mortality, and facing those tough truths about our own mortality, and the passing of people we love, and Halloween traditionally being this time of recognizing when the veil between the living and the dead is thinner than ever.
Yeah, I love that expression. I've said it before, but like, it really does feel like the wall between one world and the next world is at its thinnest. It's permeable, and I think that is something that, like, it ties back to something that I didn't really grow up with. I was aware of it, but it wasn't super big in my immediate family. It's become bigger and more significant now, but it's something that I got to embrace a little bit later on in life, and that's the observance of Dia de Muertos, or Dia de los Muertos, depending on how you want to say it. But it's the Mexican tradition of Day of the Dead, and I think that, so Halloween, since Day of the Dead lines up with All Saints Day and All Souls Day, Halloween kind of acts as this sort of kickoff, kind of, the pre-show, if the opening act, if it were, to these other observances. And I feel like Halloween is kind of like, if the doors are unlocking, if the walls are getting thinner, Halloween is the night that all those barriers get opened up, and that way you get to really feel that kind of crossing over the crossing of liminal space for the next 2 days during the observance of Dia de los Muertos. And for someone who observes this, like, I'm not a particularly religious person. I like the idea of religious traditions, and I like the stories behind them, and I want to say mythology. I feel like when you say mythology, that implies that it's not true, and I don't necessarily think that, but I do like mythology in the sense of these are the sets of stories that illustrate these belief systems. And so when you get into the mythology of Dia de los Muertos, it's the one thing that I've actually kind of claimed as my own, as something that I can, I don't know, feel like I'm putting stock in and putting belief into. And I think part of that ties into, like, so I have kind of a personal fascination with the macabre and with the creepy and with the spooky and that sort of stuff. And there's thoughts out there that suggest that Dia de los Muertos isn't spooky or scary, but at the same time, its symbolism is. We have skeletons, the calaveras and calacas, that are doing their daily things. We have all sorts of other things that are a little bit, kind of on the edges of what we would consider to be socially acceptable at times. And so I was drawn to that. I was drawn to that sort of imagery, and then learning more about what the observance means and the opportunity to reconnect with people that you don't get to see anymore was something that I found to be really beautiful. And I actually read an article by a writer that I follow. Her name is Kate Sanchez, and she writes for a lot of different, like, pop culture websites, but her big project is But Why Though, which is just like, it's video games and it's movies and it's comic books. It's all over the place. But she wrote this article about how being Mexican American kind of like imbues you with a certain degree of appreciation for horror. And she had a different experience growing up than I did, but where things kind of start to resonate with me is she quotes Guillermo del Toro, the director and writer and just all around awesome guy. He has this quote where he says that no one loves life more than we do. And he's referring, I think, to Mexicans, but I'll kind of like paint that with a broader brush. No one loves life more than we do, in a way, because we're so conscious about death. So the preciousness of life standing side by side with the one place we're all going to. And that's just something that, really resonates with me when I think about Dia de Muertos, because it's like this recognition of death as an inevitability. So it's something that doesn't have to be feared or staved off. It's just part of life. And again, when you apply that to the notion of people who have passed on, it's not even necessarily the ending. It's kind of this transformation. And so I think that is just like an extra little, I'm not quite sure what to say about it. It's just an extra little piece of this time of year that makes Halloween and the surrounding traditions and observations just a little bit more special to me personally, because it's the one time that I can honestly say that I feel like I'm in touch with something that is a little bit bigger than me. And I have all these witches and ghosts and skeletons and monsters and 2 full moons in a month to thank for all that.
Oh man, I love so much about everything that you just said. And I, growing up in Texas and having a Mexican step family, I've always been like peripherally aware of Dia de Muertos. But last year was the first time that I went to your I don't know that you call it a celebration, what recognition? What do you call it? An event, but when it's, I guess actually celebration actually probably is appropriate.
I think celebration works. Yeah, like we set up like the altar. And we, encourage people to bring things that remind them of their loved ones. So it's an observation, I
That was the
guess,
word I
but
was looking
it
for.
really is a
But
celebration. That's yeah, that's the thing that I love. That's one of the things that I love most about Dia de Muertos is that it's not like there's somber elements. It's something to be taken seriously, but much like Halloween itself, it's not a time to like
yeah,
be sad,
right.
unless of course you need to be sad. It's a time to kind of like find the connection. And a lot of times it's a very joyful connection.
Yeah, and I mean, I so appreciated having that opportunity last year. Even though there was joy infused into it. I think last year I was really in need of time to grieve, um, and perhaps would be this year too. Like as many people have lost folks during this time, and but especially just like listening to you now and reflecting on another podcast I was listening to earlier today. I think a theme for me this year is also just confronting and becoming more comfortable with my own mortality. Um, in addition to thinking about, the mortality of my loved ones and then the ones who have already passed. In particular, a podcast I was listening to earlier today was interviewing Captain Chris Hadfield, the astronaut who did the not Life on Mars, Space Oddity. He did the Space Oddity music video when
Yeah.
he was yeah, and he's talked about this before. I feel like he's done a lot of videos, especially like this year during the pandemic, talking about preparing for your own death. And he just talks a lot about how important that is and how it can make you just feel more calm about it. And he does talk about it specifically with death, but he also just talks about it with any hard thing. If you're facing something where you think there might be bad news, news that you don't want to hear, something that might move your life in a direction that you don't want it to go in, what you can do is just prepare for it and think through every direction that might take you and how can you be ready for it. And that way, if and when the news does come, you can just sort of receive it with a bit more of calm and a bit more acceptance because you've sort of already readied yourself for it and you don't have to just kind of like flounder around and figure out what to do. You know what to do already. Like there's a plan.
Yeah. That's great. Sorry, I love that guy. Astronauts.
He's so good. Oh man, I know. I feel like the fact that they literally can see the Earth in its
uh,
totality from far away, they really have just. This is gonna sound cheesy, but like they've gotten the bigger picture. It really
they
sometimes it
have.
really does seem like they have.
Now I'm feeling like a bad space fan, but there is a quote from an astronaut who was, I think, part of the Apollo program, where he's essentially saying like, whenever I hear somebody being like closed-minded or bigoted, I want to take them to the moon, grab them by the shoulders, and be like, "Look at that! Do you see that?" And just like force them to have that kind of bigger perspective, because when you can see things from that, it seems so cause and effect simple, but when you can see the world from that perspective, you see that the borders, that the nations, the things that we've built up to separate ourselves, we put them there, you know like they're things that are
Hmm.
within our grasp to change and to alter and to, where necessary, move beyond, and they seem petty in that kind of perspective. And I think I honestly think it's pretty wild that he has that sort of, not the same perspective, but a similarly you know enlightened, illuminated, peaceful perspective on the idea of death and uncertainty overall. Like, life itself is uncertain. The greatest risk that we'll ever take is just being alive.
Yeah,
And so, like, the fact that death will always be a part of it, it doesn't have to be a freezing factor. If anything, it should be a motivating factor, because your death is going to be part of the final, punctuation of your life. And so I think acknowledging it as an inevitability provides a certain degree of inspiration to make whatever time that you have here count, and to try to, like he says, be prepared for it, both in the sense of having your affairs in order, but also just, if you knew that you're going to die in 10 seconds, you could spend 9 of those seconds looking back on your life and being like, yep, all right, I'm okay with this.
Yeah. And you actually just reminded me of another thing that he said in the interview, which was, sometimes people will say things to him like, would you really want to take a one-way ticket to Mars? With us knowing how long it takes to get to Mars and just how risky it is. And any of the first folks who are going to go, it's a high chance they're never coming back. And his response to that is just like, life is a one-way ticket, right? Like, none of us know how or when we're going to die. Does it really matter to you so much where it happens? And I am someone who definitely, I'm just like, no way would I ever go to Mars. And I don't think that opinion is changing. But to hear it in that perspective really, really changed things for me of like, yeah, life is a one-way ticket. So what? Like, do what you love, do what you're passionate about, because we're all only here for so long.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it, because it's like simultaneously acknowledging the risk that's inherent in everything, but it's also not necessarily like, screw it and like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not encouraging people to be like irresponsible with their lives, but rather just to kind of like take stock of them and be aware of it, and not let the fact that there's risk involved keep you from actually living it.
Yeah. And, we sort of started talking about this at the beginning, but that's whether it is Halloween as we celebrate it today, whether it is Dia de Muertos, whether it's Samhain, whatever this time of the year cultural traditions have existed over the eons. I think that's a big part of what this is about, is that recognition, and trying to find the joy or the upside or simply the sort of acknowledgement at peace that you can. And one last thing that I sort of wanted to tease out, and then of course if you have any final thoughts as well, but one thing that sort of occurred to me is we had been talking about how, especially with a lot of the earlier like pagan traditions, part of how this became a festival time was it was the end of harvest and it was time to prepare for a hard winter. And I was talking about how winter was very hard, much harder back in those days, and you may or may not survive it. And one thing that stood out to me was like, all we've been hearing for a few months is how hard winter is going to be. I think around the globe, but especially here in the US with regards to the pandemic, and also maybe some weather related things, my gosh. But we just keep hearing over and over again how hard winter is going to be, and not being someone who's ever lived in like a rural area or I don't know, like a super northern place, like hearing about you need to prepare for winter and how hard winter is going to be is just like a very new concept to me, and one which in a way does take us back to those earlier celebrations of Samhain or whatever you want to call those earlier days of Halloween, and sort of puts us in touch with that again. So it's exactly what you said of, yeah, there's a lot of scary stuff happening in 2020, and in a way this is the best time ever to actually be celebrating Halloween.
I don't know how to follow that. That's perfect. Now let's go to our segment that's named after a dick joke.
Yep, that's what it's time for now. All right, now is time for our just about final segment. Final, like, actually talky segment, I guess you could say. Just the tip, in which we give ourselves 1 minute each to feel the feels, whatever it is that's been on our mind this week, or just an opportunity to express our emotions, shout into the void, whatever it is, but you only get 1 minute. And I forgot that I need a timer. Or actually, I think we discussed this before. I'm going to go first because we want to end on a happier note. And you said you have something happy today. Is that right?
I think so. It's happy to me.
All right, cool. Well, then do you have any kind of timer for me?
Let's see. So I can keep track of your time, and then I'll make like an obnoxious noise on this end, and I can replace it in post with something that makes more sense.
Oh, I love it. Isn't this great? Like, there one day maybe we will have like an actual setup system for a timer. I feel like every single episode we're like, what do we okay.
You're with us as we discover it, folks. You're seeing the experiment play out in real time.
Yeah. All right. Well, if you're ready with your annoying mouth sound,
got thousands.
Just let me know when.
All right. Let's go in 3, 2, 1.
So this week I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm despondent, I feel betrayed. um Basically I also feel like karma hit me a lot. I might get judged for this. I went to the barber. They are taking lots of safety protocols. I felt very safe about doing it. I haven't been since early March, and I've really loved how my hair has grown out. Been doing the quarantine hair, so I just wanted to get a little trim, clean it up a little bit, make it look a little bit better. Instead, I got an accidental, very big haircut that I think looks terrible, and I have not taken a hat off since I got it, and I'm just really upset about it because I liked the hair that I've been having, and this is honestly just bringing me down across the board. And it's been a rough like 24 hours since I got that haircut. And yeah, I don't know. I wanted to use my just the tip time to continue to vent about this as I have to anyone who has talked to me in the past 24 hours because I can't get over it. I'm not dealing with it. Oh yeah, that was an annoying mouth sound. Wow.
I'm sorry. Did you want to finish your thought?
Oh, I did. I did it while you were making that sound.
Okay, cool. So that'll be recorded on your end.
Yeah.
On my end, it's just solid brick of noise. Wonderful. But yeah, no, I get that, and you know, it is our time to feel the feels. So you even had a little bit in there where you're worried about being judged for something, but like, no, there's no judgment in just the tip. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, and I do hope that things, time progresses in a favorable way, and you can look back on this and laugh.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe. Are you ready? Are you ready for your 1 minute, Bo? I've got a timer all set up.
Yes. Okay, great. So count me in.
Ready, set, go.
All right. So in because it is spooky season and it is October, this is kind of the month where, I don't know, it's just really significant for my wife and I. We just celebrated our 3-year anniversary. We got married in October, and of course Halloween is a really big deal. And it just has me thinking today. I think about this a lot of days actually, but especially right now, since I have this moment of feeling whatever I need to feel. I just want to say that I appreciate her. This has been 7 months in quarantine. Days have been difficult. Lots of stuff has been going on, just like in life and in the world. And sometimes it's hard to like keep things together. And so I just want to say that I really appreciate having her. And that's kind of all I got to say. She's my best friend. She's very supportive, and I hope that everybody has an opportunity to have someone in your life.
I forgot that my headphones are on, and so only I could hear the noise.
No, it's fine. I wrapped it up perfectly.
You did.
Perfect-ish.
That was oh man, I had my phone right by the mic so it would pick up on it and everything and forgot.
And then you just blasted in your headphones?
Oh yeah, I turned the volume all the way up. Yep, that was not smart. All right.
Are your ears okay?
Yeah, but that was wonderful. Does Sloan listen to the podcast? Will she never hear that?
I've been trying to get her to listen. She's listened to it a couple times. She says that our voices are so soothing as she falls asleep.
Is that it? Is that why she falls asleep?
I don't know. I think you're exciting as hell. I don't talk that much to boringify the whole thing, but yeah.
Well, in any case, that was a wonderful dedication. And yeah, anything else you have to say before we wrap up today, Bo?
Yeah, I have one thing to talk about as kind of a final thought. And like, we mentioned earlier that we're recording this in mid-October. This episode is going to go up before the end of October because what's the point of having a Halloween episode after Halloween? Am I right, folks? But that means that we have something really scary to look forward to, and that is the 2020 presidential election.
No.
And so I just want to take a little bit of a moment to soapbox good boys and girls and people of all identifiers, make sure that you have a plan to vote. This is not me saying that I hope you'll vote. I know you'll vote, but you should have a plan to make sure that you do it. A lot of states have been making extra precautions for absentee voting. Some states have been rolling those back because they suck. There are early voting stations available depending on where you live, and just be aware of what your local situation is like. To learn more about that, you can visit vote.org, which is a site that I found to be pretty helpful. You can visit your local board of elections, and just kind of peruse the information that's available to you, to make sure that whether you're sending in an absentee ballot, or going to vote in person early, or voting on election day in person itself, that you've taken all the proper precautions, and that you're ready to get out there and make your voice heard. Every election is important, and that goes for your local elections and all your state and midterm elections. But this particular election feels significant and auspicious. And I think that if we're going to secure a more hopeful future, it's going to take all of us. So if you have the means, just make sure that you're ready to go out and get out there.
Yeah. The one thing I would add is I really like the website Ballotpedia, especially for all of those down ballot elections, which are so important. Maybe you're disillusioned with the idea of presidential election votings. I would still encourage you to, maybe if you feel that way, like give your vote on behalf of someone who cannot vote, like, the many undocumented folks in our country who are not able to vote. There's all kinds of people who are unable to vote. But yeah, if you need another reason to be convinced, those down ballot races are so important and will have very real individualized impacts on your local community. So those are good ones to be getting out the vote for. And if you don't know who's running and what races you're able to vote on in those next month, look up Ballotpedia. They have a lot of good information out there. But what's your plan to vote?
So we're doing absentee. And also, before I get into that, I just want to say thank you for bringing up Ballotpedia. That has been a lifesaver in a lot of those smaller elections. And it kind of reminds you that there is no such thing as a small election. It doesn't matter if it's, your city council person or somebody going on your school board. The decisions that those people are empowered to make will affect so many people. So, an election is about you, but it's not just about you. It's about us, and it's about a lot of other people. So just make sure that's a really great resource. But yeah, so we just received our mail-in ballots, which we're going to fill out with gusto. I haven't decided yet if we're going to mail them back in or try to find one of the physical drop-off boxes, but we're going to get that out and get it out early to make sure it has time to be counted.
Nice.
How about you? What's your plan?
I am early voting. I know where my location is. I want to go right on the first day in case there are any issues. I might have a few days to clear them up. And of course, my backup plan, because we should all have backup plans here, is if that doesn't work out, then I guess I'll go on election day. I think I might need to look up into my backup plan a little bit more just to make sure I've got all of my T's crossed and I's dotted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my backup plan is to do early voting since we already have the ballots, and if something is weird with them or we're not able to get it out or something like that, then yeah, I'm going to do the in person at the early voting station.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hopefully you all have voting plans too. Reach out to your friends, make sure they have voting plans. If you're able to help anyone go vote, do that as well. Do whatever you can. And completely off this topic, I just have one more thing I want to share, which I forgot to earlier, which is a book recommendation. I just started reading it, so I'm only a few pages in, but I know lots of people can vouch for it. It's called Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, and it is a new YA novel out this year. And it is in part about Dia de Muertos. It's a queer trans guy in high school whose family runs a cemetery, and it's about all kinds of very interesting and awesome topics, and also was the first ever trans fiction book by a trans person to be on the New York Times bestseller list, which is an amazing accomplishment that should have happened years ago.
Yeah, that's really awesome, though. I'm glad that that's making that impact.
Yeah, but if you want a spooky read, if you want a trans read, if you just want to learn more about Dia de Muertos, I highly recommend this novel, and we'll put some info about it in the description box if you want to go check it out.
Hell yes. And if you have any questions about Dia de Muertos, I'm not like an expert, but I am pretty I do take the practice as seriously as I can. So if anybody wants to know anything or something like that, you know how to find us and drop your questions over there.
How can they find us, Bo?
You can find us at, well, first off, let's get into how you can listen to this. You can subscribe and listen to Everything's Bigger everywhere you get fine podcasts. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the YouTube as the audio visual version. This will be just audio with like a static image, I guess. I don't know. We'll make it pretty.
I mean, yeah, I'm just going to slap a logo on there for a while. Occasionally we've got video versions while we're remote, but you can go watch the older episodes with some very shiny and slick in studio video recordings if you would like to.
Right, exactly. And you can, if you're listening, we encourage and we welcome your reviews. Let us know what you think. You can review us on Apple Podcasts. If you want to get in touch with us with questions, comments, or if you want to learn about Dia de Muertos, like I was just ranting about, you can email us at everythingsbigger69@gmail.com. And you can follow us on the social media. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram, both at BiggerPod. And you can follow us each via our individual channels. You can follow Jack at Jack is not a bird. And you can follow me at L_enmascarabo. We'll write that in the show notes because I picked a cooler name, but it's not an easier to understand name.
Yeah, and while you can hit up Bo on Twitter or other social media or via our email for questions about Dia de Muertos, you can ask me any questions you have about pumpkins, because I know my stuff about pumpkins, or I am an amateur pumpkin, not quite historian, just like learning about them a lot.
Oh, come on, don't be so humble. You're Jack the Pumpkin King. Ask him your questions, folks. 'Tis the season. But yeah. I think if there's nothing else, this has been a really great conversation about. Go ahead.
I was just going to say this is our longest episode ever, so yes, this is finally it.
Is it? I thought the first quarantine. Oh, you know what? Never mind. I was going to be like, I thought the first quarantine one was an hour 45, and here we are at an hour 49. So yes, welcome to our longest episode ever. Things get weird when you're in quarantine, folks. But I'm really glad that we did talk this much, because this is something that is near and dear to both of us. And I hope that you, dear listener, find our explorations of the history and significance of Halloween to be ghoulishly interesting. I would have come up with something alliterative, but I couldn't.
It's much better. I haven't practiced my evil laugh in a while. I got to get to work on that.
Oh man, when I really warm up, I can throw down with some evil laugh. Pray you never have to hear it.
Oh man,
for it will be the last thing you hear. But anyway, this has been great, and so I just want to thank you, Jack, for exploring the season of spookiness with me.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for indulging me in this cultural collision of grave dust and glitter.
Grave dust and glitter. And dear listeners, thank you for daring to tune in.